So the last step or series of steps will be the lining. I'm going to demonstrate with a lining that I've previously constructed. I drafted a little bit differently than what we talked about, so I might use some different tools to explain how to do this. But the first step, of course, is to sew your lining together, to put in your darts, set in your sleeves. On the sleeve for the lining, you should take and do a second stitch just so to prevent any pulling and popping. You don't want to have to get back in there. So what I've done here is actually done a little, I know it's difficult to see because of the print, but maybe right here in this white spot, you can see where that's my seam. And then I did a little shallow zigzag right behind it to kind of reinforce it. So that way, if my initial seam pops, then I have that to rely on, to fall back on, so I don't have to get in. Repairing the lining is always a little frustrating on a jacket. So it gets put together the same way any garment gets put together, meaning you have you do your shoulders, you do your darts first, then your shoulders, then you set in your sleeves. Okay, and again, double reinforce those sleeves, press it open so it's really nice and ready to go. The next step is, so what you're going to do now is to take your lining and fold it in half. And at the fold, you're going to measure in that 1 inch that you drafted and get to that actual stitch line. So what you'll do is from the neck, you will stitch down 2.5 inches and back tack. And that what's left will become your pleat. So just stitch from neckline down 2.5 inches, back tack, and stop. Then you're going to hop down to the waist, and you're going to find the waist and straddle 2 inches over this waistline. And again, stitching 2 inches. So back tack, down 2 inches, and back tack in the area of the waist. Then you're going to do the same thing at the hem. So again, your fabric's on the fold here. You're going to stitch from the bottom up 2 inches and back tack. So that gives you plenty of pleat in between for relaxation. So once I have it stitched in those 3 spots, what you want to do is to fold it so it's an inverted pleat. So you're going to bring your real center back seam line together, and the extra that's there will be folded like an inverted pleat, and you're going to press it. So yours will be stitched. I'm just giving you a sample here. Yours will be stitched 2 inches at the neck, 2 inches at the waist, and 2 inches at the hem. And what I want you to do is to baste it, is to fold it flat on the back side, pin it, and then baste it all the way through so it stays in place, and then give it a really good press. And it will stay until the jacket is done so that we make sure we're not pulling on the lining. So baste these down. Again, wax your thread, take smaller stitches, make sure it's really straight, and then you will be able to see your, you'll be able to see your inverted pleat on the other side. So this is the right side of the lining, and this is the wrong side. The next step is to take that center back. You're going to be pinning from the center back. Don't forget your jacket is turned inside out at this point. You're going to take that center back seam of your lining and put right sides together with the center back. And again, that notch in the facing is very handy. So I'm hoping that you're learning to appreciate notches. And you're going to pin right sides together all the way around. So now you can go through and make sure that everything's lining up. So here's my shoulders for my lining. and my jacket. So I'm going to pin there. And again, don't forget, if we talked about this, and this is where you're going to have opposing curves. So you want to make sure you get in there and pin, 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 pin all the way around. And I'm going to go ahead and do that all the way down the facing, down the front, all the way to the hem. So I've stitched my lining right sides together to my facing. The next thing I'm going to do, I'm not going to demonstrate this because this is not the lining I'm putting in this jacket, so I don't want to crease the fabric. But what you want to do before you turn it to the right side is to go around. You want to clip your curve. When you clip your curve, you're going to be clipping the lining only. Don't clip the facing because the lining is the one that needs to be where the stress needs to be relieved. And then you're going to press the seam open flat like so all the way down. Here, let me get on a straight run here so you can see. You're going to press the seam open flat like so, and then you're going to press it towards the lining. So you'll press it all towards the lining. But it's called busting. So you're going to bust this seam open and press it. That's a little industry term. You're going to press the seam open, bust it open, flat, and then it'll very nicely give you a nice crease there where you can press it from, you want to press all the seam allowance so that it's going towards the lining. With my lining stitched in, I now pull the sleeves over, and as you can see, don't ignore that, this is for another jacket. Your lining will be complete all the way around. Okay? The next step is to tack it down, the sleeve down at the underarm. So what you're going to do is to make sure that you line up that underarm seam. And again, mine is not an underarm seam. So I'm going to do it on the princess and make sure here. There we go. So I'm using my fingers from both sides to make sure that my seams are lined up. So pretending this is my underarm seam, I can feel with my finger that it's lined up exactly to the seam on the other side. And then what I'm going to do is that little X stitch that I showed you in a few videos back. So I'm going to go in one side, and I'm going to pick up the lining and just enough of the jacket so I feel like I'm tacking to the inside. So you're basically getting into the seam allowance here. Fix my lighting a little bit. And I'm going to make an X stitch. Picking up, I'm now tacking my lining to my jacket. So I've gone in this way, and then I'm going to go across from it, go in the same way. It's a little X stitch. And then go back again. I'm making this big so you can see it, but it should be rather small. So I'm going to go over it twice just to make sure. And again, I'm catching the lining and the seam allowance underneath it, it's gonna be a sense, more of a sense than anything. And then I can knot off. So I'm gonna cross stitch, again going this way here, and then this way here. Cross stitch, attaching my lining at my underarm. I'm not going to have you put them, sometimes they're done at the cap. I'm not going to do that this time. So I'm going to knot off and then clip. And again, just another refresher. When you knot off, is to bury your tail. So put your tail in there, come out any other place on the jacket, and then so you can snip it close to the fabric. Your tail will be buried on the inside, your knot will be preserved. So the next, so turn it inside out, stitch it, press, press, turn it inside out, snake your sleeves through, tack at the underarm, and let's talk about the vents. Before I pin it up, I just want to show you that what you're going to do is to sew the lining seam and to stop to go past the edge by 1/2 inch and back tack on the lining. So when you're sewing the lining together, right sides together, if you haven't done that, go back and make sure that you have included the seam allowance and you've stopped beyond at that actual turning point. Then what you're going to do is you're going to cut. You do have permission this time to clip into that corner. Okay, so let me pin this to the jacket and then I can show you how it works. So I have my lining, I'm just pinned it here just for demonstration purposes. So the first thing that I want to do is let's take this back lining and just tuck it behind for the moment and work on the top one. So with the top one, and again you'll have to make sure that your garment is lying really nice and flat. What you're going to do is you're going to take the edge along the edge of the vent, and again this is the underlay, and you're going to turn it and you're going to line it up with that edge. Pretty much bring it, that little seam that you took and cross-stitched down way back when, you'll turn it to there. And that, of course, will go all the way down. Then what you'll do is flip it and line up your lining, again, so it's nice and flat. And take a tailor's chalk and mark kind of where the crease is. You could actually even finger crease it, but this part is going to be cut off. Way off here. Again, make sure you mark it carefully. So you're going to cut this off. So that, and again, just don't forget you're going to have, this will all be lining here. This sample is a little small, so this will all be lining now. Okay, so that's going to fold over that. This side will get tacked to the lining. So the upper flap, the upper vent, will be stitched right to the lining. And then what you will do when those two are in place is to grab the vent and to take that extra seam allowance is going to get folded over the vent. You want to stitch it down on this side. So I've pinched the vent, the two pieces you put together, back stitched together. You're going to put the lining over that. The lining will then go down, and we'll get blind stitched to the jacket. Now this is not a traditional way to do this. There is actually a whole, the lining actually has a whole other way of drafting. Again, I'm simplifying in some spots just so we can get through the course. But if you take a look at jackets and feel through, so I invite you to go into your closet or your find a jacket somewhere in your closet or a family member or friend's closet and pull it out and look. You'll see that the lining is drafted much differently than the jacket, in that to accommodate the vent they'll shift the seam in the lining over. So I didn't really want to go there. I thought that this was a nice way to finish it. It's not traditional, but it's a nice way to finish it, and the jacket will be beautiful when you're done. Okay, so that's the vent, how to finish the lining on the vent, and let's take a look now at finishing up at the hem.